Hi everyone, welcome to another session of Caffeine and Carrots. Today we have Jan Young with us, and Jan really do not need any introduction in CS space. Welcome, Jan.
Oh, it's so nice to see you, Anshi. I'm looking forward to chatting again today.
Absolutely, always been a pleasure chatting with you. So for today, we want to talk more about the jobs and skills in CS. So looking at that landscape, what we have today, Jan, I think I will kick off this conversation and hear about your observations of the industry, the way the market condition is, and how is CS reacting to it, and essentially, are there any changes coming in the CS role or the function given the way market condition is?
Yeah, and I think when we were sort of exchanging notes earlier, I really would agree with you that there isn't really any stability in the market right now. I'm mostly aware of what's happening in the US, a little bit in Europe. I'm not sure about other geographic areas, but certainly with the market economy, there's been, just a lot of pulling back on funding of startups that then just started to have more of a ripple effect. And, so certainly we've seen a lot of layoffs. And then I thought, well, maybe things are starting to change, seeing a lot of hiring and a lot of people announcing that they've been hired, a lot of roles out there. But then still, again, seeing layoffs. And I just think that it's a lot of up and down. I don't think it's impossible to get the role that you're looking for, but it is hard because there are so many really qualified, highly qualified people who are looking right now. But I've also seen even people who are transitioning into CS get their first role right now. And so I think it really varies. And I think it becomes very dependent upon sort of the micro, economy, the particular product, and that sort of thing. So I think besides the additional research and preparation that it takes, I think you really need to know a lot about the company and do some research specifically about the industry that they're in as well.
Nice. So I totally concur with that thought. In fact, both on LinkedIn and in the circle here, even in APEC, there are a lot of hirings and a lot of layoffs. Typically, APEC is a region where layoffs are not so common. Okay, it's more of a employee retention kind of region, but then it's still quite unstable. So in that context, while CSMs are looking for roles, I wanted to understand, do you think organizations are looking for some key skills, very specific skills in the CSMs when they're hiring, specifically because they should make the best decision and have more stability rather than having somebody come on board and realize, it's not the right thing happening. More stability in the function, in the role, and with the resources where.
Well, I think because there are so many people who are looking, companies are being even more choosy, right? Whereas, year and a half, 2 years ago, it was very hard for companies to find, exactly what they're looking for. Now I see companies really sort of upping the ante, where they want to be very specific in terms of the match that they're looking for. However, it's always a good idea as the person who's going to be the employee, the CSM, to also be choosy, frankly, because it takes so much work to find the right match that if it isn't really the right match, then you have to go out there and look again, you really don't want to be in that situation. So I think in part, as someone who's looking for a role as a CS leader or a CSM, you want to be really specific in understanding what type of company, what size of company, what type of industry, what type of role, how large a team are you looking to join, what sort of book of business are you looking for? Are you looking to work with scaled CS, or do you want to be more in an enterprise role? The more you understand about specifically what you're looking for, and what skills you have that sort of, that you bring to the hiring manager and to the company, and how you can really position yourself well, then that helps you not only find the correct roles that you really want to apply for, but also to be able to make your case and pitch when you're speaking to the hiring manager in the company, but also asking the right questions to really exploring and understanding if you think that you're a match for the company. So it can and really should go both ways in terms of being choosy. That said, I think anyone who's looking for a role in CS, you also want to have, as large a pipeline as you possibly can, right? And you want to be sure that you have a lot of companies that you're talking to, and in the interview process you're getting a lot of practice. You want to, connect with others who are in the job search mode so that you can do that. In terms of, though, specifically to the skills, I think that, while there's general skills that you want to identify, for the type of CS role that you're looking at for, scaled CSM or digital CS role is going to be slightly different than enterprise or strategic, things like that. So you want to, know what those roles generally are. And then otherwise you want to look specifically, like maybe you're looking in cyber, security, or maybe you're looking in AI, or maybe you're looking in more general SaaS tech or ed tech. There might be other specific skills that are specific to that industry that you should be aware of, and be able to communicate what you bring to the table around that. So, some of it's just, like the basic keywords around being a CSM. Some of it's about what type of role you would have, within an organization, or the type of organization, and some of it's industry specific. But having a command of that and knowing what those specifics are for you is really important in order to find that match and to make your case.
Nice. So obviously it requires a lot of patience for folks to figure out and be at it, especially given the market is. But one thing, I was speaking to one of the CSMs, she was looking out for a role, and in fact, she would have spoken to a few organizations. She came up with a very, very specific question. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. So while CSM is an individual contributor role, it also requires massive collaboration within the team and across the team.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that she wanted to understand was, what is it that CSMs individually can bring to the table that adds value to the team per se?
Well, it depends on how much experience you have in this industry. If you're fairly new, then you want to at least understand what all of those different roles are in SaaS tech, right? If you've been around and you have more experience in SaaS tech and as a CSM, then you want to have specific examples about how you've collaborated and how you've sort of moved the needle and had an impact, right? But I think CSMs are in this sort of unique position where you're at this sort of intersection between the customer and the company. And so your role is to be a strategic advisor to the customer, ensuring that they are, reaching the outcomes that they specifically were looking for, why they purchased your product, right? So you want to be sure that you're, identifying what that is, have like SMART goals where you're, tracking what those things are, where you communicate back to the customer what they've achieved or what challenges that you have, in helping them achieve that, really establishing a partnership with them. But then there are also sometimes challenges that they help identify, where then you need to work internally. And so you are then at that intersection with the company and all of the internal organization, all the internal departments, within that organization. So it might be that you're working with product to help them identify what kinds of things the customers need and what you're seeing in the marketplace, right? That might be some unique insights that they may not be aware of, and ways that connects to customers and maybe revenue opportunities for the company. And so the product needs to be aware of that. It could be for your product in your company, you have a large operations team. And so how do you need to work with them to ensure that you have improvements in the processes and that you're identifying friction points that need to be alleviated or things like that. That can also, friction points are something you might also talk to product about. If you're seeing that your customers aren't adopting the product or aren't getting through onboarding, things like that, and because of friction. Or, it could be that when you're talking to sales or marketing, you can identify ways in which, they need to hear insights from your current customers as they're trying to reach out to new prospects. Or with marketing, you might also be trying to work on customer advocacy, right? Things like that. But then also in the intersection between the customer and the company, you're also needing to keep an eye on and sort of targets that the company is trying to reach, revenue targets and other types of targets that are important to the company, either that quarter or that year. You want to be sure that you're aligning and prioritizing your efforts with customers that also align and help your company achieve those goals. It's this, symbiotic relationship between the customer and company, and you both need to exist. Right. So that, as a CSM, you're in that place to ensure that both outcomes are achieved. So there's a number of things to keep in mind, and your skills as a collaborative your collaborative skills are really important then when you're working with the customer throughout their organization, as well as working across your organization internally.
Lovely. So it indeed is a very heavy role being a CSM, no doubt about it. So let me just present a very open-ended question. It requires your customer relationship building skills. It requires collaborating. It requires understanding of the product, the business, sometimes a bit of technical understanding to really bridge that gap between the products and all. So much goes in being an honest CSM there. So how do you suggest folks who are in the role, or even for folks who are looking out for right roles in the industry, should upskill themselves?
Well, you first should do an assessment of where you're at and what skills you currently have versus what job you're trying to go for and what skills they're looking for. Oftentimes companies and hiring managers want to know that you've done it before. Now, that's a little frustrating because, if you've done it before, maybe you don't really want to do it again. Why would you just go and do the same thing over and over, right? But at the same time, it's important to sort of evaluate if you do have some gaps and things that you either want to go reach out and, perhaps there are books you might read, groups you might join, certifications or courses you might take. All of those kinds of things are out there, right? And so identifying what kinds of things you can do to show that you have that understanding and that you would be able to accomplish it and achieve, kind of basically solve the pain point that the hiring manager has. That's how you want to best position yourself. Sometimes it might not be in the most recent role that you had. It might be that you have volunteer roles. It might be, past roles. It might be a combination of things that are rolling up together. So it's part of how you need to think about how you're positioning yourself as, a CS leader or CSM, and how you can achieve those, basically solve those pain points for the company or for the hiring manager, and how you can articulate that.
So if we take it a little further and try to understand, CS role essentially is where you bare minimum is you have to be customer oriented. Rest of the things perhaps you can still learn on the job, but as long as you're customer focused and customer oriented, perhaps you will still do a fairly good job. But then, given where the market condition is, given the so many layoffs that have happened, what do you think are the adjacent roles for CSMs that they can get into and still be customer oriented so that they can continue to nurture themselves and build themselves for the right roles?
Well, I want to challenge you a little bit on just being customer oriented. Yes, we are, customer centric by nature, being in customer success role. But I think too, we want to think of ourselves first as being strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really that strategic role that is most important. We are customer facing, but to just be customer oriented could mean that all of a sudden we're doing, support work or something like that, or, whatever the other, types of things we might fill in doing. Maybe we're filling in for operations or something because we know those things. That isn't necessarily the best use of our time. Now, sometimes the role that you are filling in, actually performing at a company is a combination of roles. Maybe it is support and operations and CS. You should still identify what those different hats are, what those different roles are, and be clear what you're doing and when. I often recommend CS leaders, if they are setting, if they have CSMs who are doing support as well, to even set up a separate email for support and have the customers send in emails to support so they can track and service the support issues separately, right? Because if you're not thinking about what the customer needs strategically and ensuring that they're going to, achieve the outcomes, then it doesn't matter how good of support you have if they aren't achieving the outcomes that they need to. And you do need to then ensure that you're doing those strategic activities to achieve that. So, I guess I would say that if any of these things that I'm talking about seem unclear, then you definitely want to, do some reading and attend some webinars and do some things to build up those skills. Certainly reading books like the Customer Success Professional's Handbook or 7 Pillars of Customer Success. There's, others out there as well. And that, you want to be sure that you understand the language of CS. And it could be that you've been working as a CSM or a CS leader for many years, but you've been sort of what I refer to as winging it. Maybe you haven't taken the time to really get the chops and to really understand all of the fundamentals. And you think, well, that's okay. I can do it. I've been doing it for a while. As professionals, we should all strive to better understand what the fundamentals are and what is happening cutting edge. Things like using ChatGPT to be more efficient, right? Or, maybe there are, certain products out there that you could bone up on that you can that in your particular industry are well known for being used, right? Things like that are really important because you want to have those things under your belt so that when you're going back into a role that you can spend the time focusing on learning the product and the people and the processes, and people internally and your customers, that those people who are external, right? There's so much to learn when you first start in your first 30, 60, 90 days. Like anything that if you're in between roles, you want to take the time to really bone up on all of the other things that are like the fundamentals while you can. And network. I would also say it's really important to network, when you're, it's not just when you're job searching that it's important to have people around you, but when you're back into a CSM or CS leader role, You want to be able to call on others and say, hey, how have you seen this before? Or we're looking to change the structure of this other thing, or I have this challenging customer. Think about, I lead weekly CS office hours where people can exchange ideas. There's lots of different Slack channels, where people can go and exchange ideas. There's lots of different webinars and other communities, Gain, Grow, Retain, things like that. Go and exchange ideas with other people. There's not only because you don't need to recreate the wheel, but also because that wheel is ever evolving. We work in technology. Technology changes. And so I think it's important to set yourself up to take advantage of all the learnings and all the technology out there that can help you.
Lovely. And thank you for bringing up that CS is really not only about being customer oriented, but have to be strategic. Otherwise, as you pointed out rightly, you may get into the grind of support and so on and so forth, and may not be able to bring value to customer, neither to the team. So,
and I should just interrupt to say that support is very important. Don't get me wrong. Support is critical, but it is just a different activity than when you're doing the strategic, proactive work. It's the, customer education is important. Onboarding is important. All of these things, customer marketing, all of these different aspects are important. And you may have all of those hats on at once, right? But it's just important to know when you're doing which, and are you able to do the strategic activities that are going to help them reach the goals and achieve the outcomes that they need to? Because without that, those other things do fall flat.
Absolutely. So this conversation, there's so many tips you gave to all the CSMs folks or in the role or even looking out for the roles. But if we end this conversation with your one final last tip to folks who, for both in the role or even when looking out for role, what it would be?
Think about not just your strategy, but how do you actually spend your time? What sort of priorities you have, and then check with yourself. Are you actually spending your time doing those things? It's very easy for all of us to be reactive, right? And so think about how you can be proactive, or are you actually doing the things you think you're doing? And that's important whether you're in your job search mode, or when you're in the actual role, to kind of check and make certain that you're doing that. So that's certainly one thing. And I think otherwise we've kind of covered a lot of the things already in terms of how you approach your role, all the different ways that you might be wearing different hats, how to identify that. And then really also the networking and then I'd say too, making certain that you understand the foundations and have, the chops for what you're doing, but also looking ahead to what your next roles might be. We always have something that we can learn, and being sort of thirsty and hungry to learn those things is always a great quality, and will lead you to opportunities and new roles, and maybe you'll stay in CS, or maybe you'll go and do other roles, and then maybe you'll even come back to CS. I've certainly done a lot of different things myself, project management, product management, marketing, sales, a lot of different roles. But the way that I bring all of those experiences back together in working in CS, that can also help, each person. So understanding your story and understanding what you bring to the hiring manager and the company and to your customers is always a great quality to have.
Wonderful. There's so much to take away from today's conversation. Thank you so much, Jan.
Oh, great. I'm glad it was helpful. Thanks.